I still remember the day I received the invitation like it was yesterday. It was an old, yellowed letter, posted on my doorstep with no return address, and a single, cream-colored envelope bearing the Southern Mansion's crest. The words "You are cordially invited" were typed in bold, black ink, but there was no indication of who had sent it or what kind of gathering I was expected to attend. I showed it to the others, Sarah, Alex, and Jake, and we exchanged a mix of excitement and trepidation. We'd all heard whispers about the mansion's dark history, but nothing could have prepared us for what lay ahead. The invitation was followed by an eerie silence from the group, as if each of us was waiting for someone else to break the tension. I cleared my throat, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "I'm in." Sarah nodded almost imperceptibly, while Alex and Jake just shrugged. We had all known each other since college, but this expedition felt different, like we were venturing into the unknown together. A few days later, we received a reply from an address that didn't exist on our maps. The message was simple: meet us at the mansion's main gate at sundown. It was then that I realized we'd be leaving with more than just our curiosity. We were in this together, for better or worse. We made plans to leave early the next morning, eager to begin our descent into the heart of darkness. As I lay awake that night, my mind racing with questions, one thing was certain: once we stepped onto those crumbling steps, there would be no turning back. The morning sunlight cast long shadows across the overgrown lawn as we made our way to the mansion's entrance. The trees seemed to lean in, as if listening to our conversation. Sarah had brought a camera and started snapping photos of the estate, trying to capture its foreboding beauty. Alex was busy checking his phone for any last-minute messages or directions. Jake stood at the edge of the group, eyeing the mansion with a mix of fascination and trepidation. I lagged behind, taking a moment to examine the invitation more closely. The words "You are cordially invited" now seemed like a cruel joke. Our laughter echoed through the stillness as we approached the creaking front gate. As we pushed it open, a chill ran down my spine. It was then that I noticed something odd. The trees seemed to be swaying in unison, their branches tapping out a rhythm on the ground. Sarah stopped mid-step, her eyes fixed on something behind us. "What is it?" Alex asked, but before she could answer, Jake's voice cut through the air. "I don't like this." His words were laced with a quiet desperation that sent shivers down my spine. We turned to face him, but he was already striding away from the mansion, his back to us. "Jake, wait," Sarah called after him, but it was too late. He vanished into the trees like a ghost. Our laughter died on our lips as we realized we were alone. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves and sending chills down our spines. We exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of what to do next. The trees seemed to be closing in around us, their branches tangling together like skeletal fingers. I took a step forward, my heart racing with every snap of a twig or hoot of an owl. But as I looked at the mansion, its facade looming before me like a monolith of malevolence, I felt my grip on reality begin to slip. The darkness seemed to be seeping into our minds, corroding our sanity. And then, without warning, the wind died down, and an oppressive silence fell over us. We were trapped in the mansion's gaze, unable to look away from its cold, dead eyes. It was Alex who finally broke the silence, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been doing some research," he said, his eyes scanning the mansion's facade as if searching for answers. "This place has a reputation, you know." We exchanged skeptical glances, but Sarah leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. "What kind of reputation?" she asked, her voice laced with a mix of fascination and fear. Alex hesitated, his eyes darting between us before he continued. "There have been reports of strange rituals, human sacrifices. Some even say it was used as a hub for occult practices back in the day. Jake snorted, but I could see the skepticism written all over his face. "That's just small-town legend," he said, but Alex shook his head. "I've found some old newspaper articles dating back to the 1920s. They mention a man named Malcolm McAllister who allegedly conducted twisted experiments on willing participants." Sarah's eyes widened, her grip on her camera tightening. "What kind of experiments?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "Ritualistic surgeries, psychological conditioning. Some even say he was trying to summon something from the other side." The wind picked up again, rustling the leaves and sending shivers down our spines. I couldn't help but wonder if there was any truth to these outlandish claims. But as we stood there, surrounded by the oppressive silence of the mansion, I began to feel a creeping sense of unease. We were playing with forces beyond our control, and it was only a matter of time before they caught up with us. We decided to split into two groups. Sarah and I would head inside the mansion to explore its depths, while Alex and Jake went to investigate the overgrown gardens. The plan was to meet up at sundown, but as we parted ways, I couldn't shake off the feeling that we were being watched. I glanced around, but the trees seemed to be swaying in the breeze, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching out to snatch us back. Sarah and I exchanged a nervous glance before she nodded and led the way into the mansion's grand foyer. The air inside was thick with dust and the stench of decay. I coughed, my eyes adjusting slowly to the dim light as we made our way deeper into the mansion. Cobwebs clung to the chandeliers like macabre tapestries, and the walls seemed to press in on us from all sides. We moved cautiously, our footsteps echoing off the walls as we explored room after room. Each space was frozen in time, as if the occupants had simply vanished into thin air. I couldn't help but wonder what stories these rooms held, what secrets lay hidden behind the dust and debris. Sarah stopped suddenly, her hand raised in a gesture of warning. "Wait," she whispered, her eyes fixed on something ahead. I followed her gaze, my heart sinking as I saw a door that seemed to be slightly ajar. It was as if someone had recently passed through it, leaving behind a trail of disturbed air. "Do you think we should open it?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated, feeling a shiver run down my spine, but something about the room drew me in, like a moth to a flame. I nodded slowly, and together we pushed the door open, revealing a space that seemed to be waiting for us. As we ventured deeper into the mansion's labyrinthine corridors, Sarah and I stumbled upon a figure waiting for us in the foyer. It was an elderly woman, her face twisted into a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. She introduced herself as Agnes, the last surviving member of the McAllister family. Her eyes seemed to bore into our souls, as if searching for something hidden within our minds. "You shouldn't be here," she warned, her voice dripping with an unsettling intensity. "This house has a way of getting inside your head." I felt a shiver run down my spine as Agnes' words hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah seemed taken aback by her demeanor, but I tried to stay calm, intrigued by the woman's strange presence. Agnes led us on a wild goose chase through the mansion's rooms, pointing out various artifacts and relics that seemed to hold secrets of their own. She spoke of Malcolm McAllister's dark past, of rituals and human sacrifices, of experiments gone wrong. Her words painted a disturbing picture, one that left me questioning our very presence in the house. As we walked, Agnes' eyes seemed to gleam with an otherworldly intensity, as if she was hiding something from us, something terrible. I began to wonder if we had made a grave mistake by coming here, if we were merely pawns in some twisted game of fate. The wind outside seemed to howl in agreement, the trees creaking and swaying like skeletal fingers. We settled into our temporary quarters, a grand bedroom with ornate furnishings and faded tapestries. The bed creaked beneath us as we lay down, the mattress soft but lumpy. Sarah and I exchanged a nervous glance, our eyes adjusting slowly to the dim light of the room. Agnes had left us a note, warning us about the strange occurrences in the mansion. "Don't go exploring after dark," it read. "Some things are better left unseen." I smiled wryly, feeling a thrill of excitement mixed with fear. We were alone, or so we thought. The house seemed to be watching us, its shadows twisting into grotesque shapes on the walls. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But as I lay there, listening to the creaks and groans of the old mansion, I couldn't shake the sense that we were being herded towards some unknown fate. The wind outside howled like a pack of wolves, the trees swaying in time with an unsettling rhythm. I felt Sarah stir beside me, her eyes flickering open in the darkness. "I don't like this," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the din of the wind. I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her close as we waited for the night to pass. But as the hours ticked by, the shadows outside began to take on a life of their own. I could have sworn I saw movement out of the corner of my eye, figures flitting across the walls, their faces twisted into grotesque grins. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, but deep down, I knew we were not alone in that house. The night wore on, the darkness closing in around us like a shroud. I felt Sarah's grip relax, her breathing slowing as she drifted off to sleep. I lay there, wide awake, listening to the creaks and groans of the old mansion. And then, just as I was starting to drift off myself, I heard it, a faint whisper in my ear, a single word that made my blood run cold. "Welcome." I sat up with a jolt, my heart racing as I stared at the darkness beside me. Sarah was still asleep, her chest rising and falling in a peaceful rhythm. But I knew that voice. It was the same one that had whispered "welcome" in my ear just moments before. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I threw off the covers and got out of bed. The room seemed to be bathed in an eerie, moonlit glow, casting long shadows across the walls. I fumbled for my flashlight on the bedside table and turned it on, casting a weak beam of light around the room. That's when I saw it, a small, hidden compartment in the wall, cleverly concealed behind a tapestry. My heart skipped a beat as I approached the compartment, feeling a sense of trepidation building inside me. I opened the compartment, and a faint hum filled the air. Inside, I found a series of old photographs, each one depicting a group of people gathered in this very room. They were all dressed in formal attire, their faces stern and expressionless. But it was the last photograph that made my blood run cold, a picture of Malcolm McAllister himself, standing at the center of the group with a malevolent grin spreading across his face. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized the significance of these photographs. They were proof that Malcolm had been using this house for his twisted experiments, and that we were walking in the footsteps of his victims. I wondered if Agnes knew about this compartment, or if she was hiding something from us. As I stood there, frozen with shock, I heard a faint creaking sound coming from outside the room. It sounded like someone or something was moving around the mansion, trying to get my attention. I felt Sarah stir beside me, her eyes fluttering open as she saw the look of horror on my face. "What is it?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the creaking sound outside. I hesitated, unsure of how to answer. But one thing was certain, we were no longer alone in that house. As I stood there, frozen with shock, I noticed that the photographs in the compartment seemed to be more than just random images. They were all connected by a series of symbols etched into the edges of the frames. I recognized some of them as ancient runes used in dark magic rituals. Others looked like hieroglyphs from an unknown language. Agnes appeared at my side, her eyes gleaming with an unnerving intensity. "Those symbols are part of an ancient ritual," she said, her voice low and husky. "One that Malcolm McAllister was known to have performed in this very house." I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized the significance of Agnes' words. We were dealing with something much darker than we had initially thought. As I looked closer at the photographs, I saw that each one depicted a different phase of the ritual. The first photograph showed the participants gathered around a large stone circle, their faces lit by flickering torches. The second image showed them performing a twisted dance, their bodies contorted in ways that seemed impossible for human beings. And the third photograph showed something that made my blood run cold. It depicted Malcolm McAllister standing in the center of the circle, his eyes closed as he invoked some ancient power. But what happened next was even more disturbing. The participants began to transform, their bodies contorting and twisting until they were no longer human. They became things, creatures that seemed to be born from the very darkness itself. I stumbled backward, my mind reeling with the implications of what I had seen. Agnes followed me, her eyes still gleaming with an unnerving intensity. "You see, child," she said, her voice dripping with malice. "This is not just a house. This is a portal to another world. And Malcolm McAllister was just one of many who have walked through those doors." I knew I had to find a way out of the house, but every door led only to more questions. Agnes seemed to be leading me on a wild goose chase, always disappearing just when I thought I was getting close to the truth. Sarah and I were starting to lose hope, our eyes sunken from lack of sleep and our bodies aching from exhaustion. We stumbled through the mansion's corridors, desperate for any clue that might lead us out. But every room we entered seemed to hold another secret, another puzzle to solve. I felt like we were trapped in some kind of labyrinth with no way out. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I stumbled upon a hidden laboratory deep in the basement. The air was thick with the stench of decay and something else. Something acrid and unnatural. I covered my nose with my shirt and approached the workbench, where rows of jars containing strange, glowing liquids lined the shelves. In the center of the workbench, a large, leather-bound book lay open, its pages fluttering in an eerie breeze. I recognized the symbols etched into the cover. They were the same ones from the photographs in the compartment. Suddenly, it all clicked into place. This was Malcolm McAllister's research, his attempts to unlock the secrets of the other world. And he had been using this house as a portal, summoning creatures from the darkness to do his bidding. But why? What could he possibly want with these beings? I felt a surge of determination course through my veins. I was going to find out what happened to Malcolm McAllister, no matter what it took. I turned to Sarah, who was watching me with a look of concern etched on her face. "We have to get out of here," I said, my voice low and urgent. "We have to tell someone what's going on." But as we turned to leave, we were confronted by Agnes, her eyes blazing with an unholy intensity. "You'll never leave this house alive," she hissed, her voice dripping with malice. And with that, the lights went out, plunging us into darkness. We were trapped, alone and adrift in a world of madness and terror. We were trapped in the darkness, our ears straining to pick up any sound. But there was nothing, just the silence of the mansion's depths. I could feel Sarah's hand grasping mine, her fingers cold and clammy with fear. We huddled together, trying to find some comfort in each other's presence. But even that felt like a distant memory as the darkness seemed to closing in around us. Agnes' voice echoed through the corridors, her words dripping with malice and contempt. "You'll never escape this house," she spat. "You'll never leave." I knew then that we were truly alone, cut off from the outside world by some unseen force. The isolation was starting to get to me, creeping into my mind like a cold mist. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality, like the walls of the mansion were closing in around me. Sarah seemed to sense it too, her grip on my hand tightening as we moved through the darkness. We stumbled upon a room that looked like it had been left untouched for decades, a room filled with dusty antiques and forgotten relics, but even that couldn't lift our spirits. We sat down on the floor, huddled together in despair. The silence was oppressive, weighing us down like a physical force. I knew then that we were running out of time, that the darkness was closing in around us. And as the hours ticked by, I felt my desperation growing. I wanted to scream, to shout at the top of my lungs and beg for someone to hear us. But even my voice was muffled, trapped in a prison of my own making. The darkness seemed to be absorbing all sound, leaving only an oppressive silence in its wake. As the darkness closed in around us, I felt a surge of determination course through my veins. We had to escape this house, no matter what it took. I looked at Sarah, her eyes sunken and haunted by fear. "We have to keep moving," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "We can't stay here any longer." She nodded, her grip on my hand tightening as we rose to our feet. We stumbled through the corridors, desperate for any way out. But every door led only to more questions, more terrors. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I heard Agnes' voice behind us. "You'll never leave this house," she spat, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. We quickened our pace, our hearts pounding in our chests, but it was too late. The doors slammed shut behind us, trapping us in a maze of corridors and rooms. And then we heard the whispers. Whispers that seemed to come from all around us, whispers that seemed to be coming from the very walls themselves. "You'll never escape," they whispered. "You'll never leave." I felt my grip on reality begin to slip, felt myself being pulled down into a vortex of madness and despair. But Sarah's hand was still in mine, her fingers digging deep into my palm, and with a surge of determination I turned to face Agnes. "We're not going to let you win," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "We're going to escape this house no matter what it takes." Agnes' eyes flashed with anger, her face twisted in a snarl. But I didn't back down. I stood tall, my heart pounding in my chest, and confronted the darkness head-on. And then, in an instant, everything was over. The whispers stopped, the doors opened, and we stumbled out into the bright sunlight. We were free. But as we looked back at the house, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Agnes' face was standing on the doorstep, her eyes blazing with fury and hatred. And in that instant, I knew that she would never let us go. As we stumbled out of the house, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. We had made it out alive, and that was all that mattered. But as I looked back at the mansion, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Agnes' face was standing on the doorstep, her eyes blazing with fury and hatred. And in that instant, I knew that she would never let us go. We turned to run, but it was too late. The darkness seemed to swallow us whole, and we were gone. I woke up to find myself lying on a cold, hard floor. My head was pounding and my mouth felt dry and sticky. I tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness washed over me, forcing me back down. As my vision cleared, I saw that I was in a small, dimly lit room. There were no windows, no doors, just cold, gray walls that seemed to stretch on forever. And in the center of the room, I saw Sarah's body lying on the floor. She was still and silent, her eyes frozen in a permanent stare. I tried to move towards her, but my legs felt heavy and unresponsive. I was trapped, just like Agnes had said. The darkness closed in around me, and I knew that I would never escape. I was trapped in this endless abyss with no way out. And as the hours ticked by, I realized that I was not alone. There were others here, 2 others who had been trapped in this place just like me. We whispered to each other in the darkness, our voices barely audible. "How did we get here?" one of them asked. "I don't know," I replied, "but we're stuck here now." The darkness seemed to swallow our words whole, and we were left with only the sound of our own thoughts. And as the days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months, I realized that I was losing my mind. The darkness was consuming me piece by piece. I was just a shadow of my former self, a faint echo of the person I once was. And in the end, it was not Agnes who destroyed me. It was the endless darkness itself. It was the darkness that took away my sanity, my hope, and my will to live. And as the darkness closed in around me, I knew that I was truly alone. I was trapped in a never-ending nightmare with no escape in sight.